I want to welcome everyone to tonight. This has been, I know, a challenging process for everyone involved. This development of a full-time remote option when we return to any type of in-person learning has been something that we have been looking at developing since last spring. Clearly, what we presented in our reopening plan that was presented 7 weeks ago tomorrow, back in early August, on August 12th. That plan that was presented painted a different picture than what was shared out with everyone last Monday. And I know there's been lots of, I believe a lot of folks that are on this call have had conversations with Anna Bates or Kim Croto, or some of the building principals in regards to the option. So I want to start by clarifying the way this process has unfolded. We presented a plan back in, as I said, on August 12th with the full assumption that what we had at that point in time was going to stay for reasons that we could continue, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of them tonight. This has continued to morph in regards to what we're able to offer in regards to our resources and what we can commit to as a hybrid or as a remote option. So what we first had to commit to was what our hybrid model will look like. And then once we know what the hybrid model looks like, that we would potentially be shifting to on October 13th, depending on the committee's vote last night, we then can put the remote option plan in place. So we've been developing the plan. The challenge is that what we are able to offer depends greatly on how many families opt their students into this optional plan. The problem is it's a chicken or the egg, right? You as parents and families need to have the information and adequate information in order for you to be able to make that decision. But until we have confirmed numbers, we can't give you concrete details on exactly what the plan will look like. So the process tonight is to give you a sense of, we have more clarity in regards to what we will be able to offer as of October 13th for those families that choose to stay in a fully remote plan. And we're going to do our best to explain the options and then open it up to answer questions as best we can at this point. So I apologize that this is the way this has all gone about. There was no intentional misleading anyone or putting information out that was not fully vetted. The reopening group that met was over 60 strong throughout the summer. There are a lot of things that we thought we knew back in the summer that we've learned very differently since we've opened our doors remotely. And obviously we're learning from other districts that have opened full or not many full, but mostly hybrid, and some of the things that they've experienced, good and bad, that have guided the decisions we've made. So that's the context under which we are providing this forum tonight, to give you some information and then open it up for you to have an opportunity to ask questions. When we get to the questions, we'll go through the process of how to do that. But to start, I'm actually going to turn the screen over to Kimberly Croto, our assistant superintendent, and she's going to walk you through a presentation in regards to what the remote options will look like at each of the various grade levels in schools.
Great, thank you, Brian. Hi, my name is Kim Croto, and I am the Assistant Superintendent at Triton. I first want to just take this opportunity to thank Anna Bates for all of her work and looking at different options and the capacity within the district, as well as the reopening group and the school committee and all other folks who have been involved and been able to give some really great input into this process and where we are going to land tonight, as well as just a big shout out and thank you to the parents, because I think one of the things that is a positive from this whole experience, not just the decision that is before us tonight, but all of the decisions that have been made along the way, is that the commitment that you have to your child's education and the school in general. So I appreciate that, and we look forward to continuing to work with you as we develop these plans and really finalize them so that you have a product that you are happy with and it really addresses your child's needs. So as Brian said, we certainly started out at one path early on in July, which as we learned and we started to examine some of the things that are happening around us in other schools, we have certainly changed some of the original plans. So for tonight's presentation, the goal then is to address some of the challenges in developing this remote plan, and then also to explain a little bit more clearer the options for the full-time remote. And you'll see as we go through the presentation, there are different options at different grade levels. And then finally, if your questions were not answered during the presentation, we have people here tonight, including Dave McGee, Anna Bates, myself, and Brian, who will address some of these questions. And if we can't tonight, we will certainly have a follow-up opportunity to talk or speak with you specifically. So just in regards to the process, as Brian said, our goal way back at the beginning of this summer was to develop 3 different plans. In addition to developing those 3 plans, that was in-person, hybrid, or remote, we needed to develop some type of what they would call a remote option. And that remote option was available to families if they had children who had health issues, or family members had health issues, or for various reasons were not able to attend any of the in-school programming. So the Department of Ed, realizing that that was a huge task to develop, in addition to the 3 other models, really presented a few different options for districts. And those options ranged from something that was completely controlled by the district. So you were using the district resources, you were using faculty, you had the technology, you had the structure, all intact to deliver a fully remote model, as well as the other model that was going on at the same time. And for larger districts, for the most part, that is not an issue. I know that some are actually completely staffed, from administration all the way down to additional teachers hired, just to manage and facilitate this remote option. On the other end of that, the Department of Ed looked for different vendors that they could offer districts who potentially had limited resources. And those options range from anywhere where schools would have access to a bank of curriculum that could be integrated into their school, to really options that really released the school of all of their responsibilities. And the option included not just the curriculum, but you were actually paying for educators to oversee it that potentially would be outside of the district. So it really was a range. When we started down this path, our goal was certainly to give folks a program that was really in between, because we knew we had some really powerful resources that we could potentially tap into as far as new learning platforms. We also knew that we could have some capacity to provide the educational support from some of our teachers. But like Brian said, it really was dependent on how many students we were going to enroll. And so that's where you see this diagram in front of you, the arrows going from, okay, here are the options from the Department of Ed, again, a range from in-house to outsource to, okay, now we need to think about all of those resources. And then as the numbers grew, as far as the students who potentially could take advantage of this, so did our choice or our decisions along the way. So let me first take a few slides to present our K-6 full-time remote option. So again, this remote option would take place when the district moves to hybrid or full in-person learning. And we're going to call this one Model A. And this is basically a full-time remote model that is supported by a Triton teacher. Okay, so it's one of the teachers that exists today. And the classes will be made up of students from 3 elementary schools. So we don't necessarily have the resources to have a teacher for each grade level at each school, but we certainly have a few that we could potentially collapse a class, again, going back to student enrollment, because our numbers have decreased since the start of this school year. And these decisions were made even before the first day of school. So we lost students to private schools. We potentially lost students for homeschooling. So that really impacted our numbers. And in doing so, we absolutely now do have some capacity to potentially collapse one of, or actually we're looking at 1 to 6, at least one grade across the district, and that teacher would potentially become the remote teacher. So the students in this particular model would have a fixed schedule, very similar to what your children are experiencing today. They will also have synchronous and asynchronous learning. So synchronous, again, is that live instruction where the students and the teachers are interacting live. And then asynchronous is the work that happens when the computer gets turned off. There would be frequent check-ins with classroom teachers throughout the day. And so again, it would be very similar to what your students are experiencing now. Again, caution, it potentially would not be with the same students, and it may not be with the same teacher. So those are two really important things to consider if you're looking at that model. So just to take a second and then kind of look and unpack this a little bit. What are some of the benefits of this particular model? Well, obviously, the first and foremost is that it's aligned to a district academic programming. So all of the learning priorities that your students are experiencing and involved with right now will continue in this remote option. The curriculum will stay the same, the scope and sequence, how and the order things are introduced. Again, there will be synchronous and asynchronous activities. It will be taught and led by a Triton educator who has been trained in all of these platforms. And it really does lend itself to situations where students may need to go from hybrid to a remote option seamlessly. So there's not gaps, there's no need to catch up or kind of get them acclimated to a new learning environment. So, of course, with every benefit, there comes challenges. And so what are the challenges in this model? Well, students will most likely be introduced to a new remote teacher. It will, again, be somebody in the district. It may not be from their school. And they will have a new group of students to friend. So it will be a whole new cohort. And if the student does want to return to hybrid, that original classroom that they exited may not be in existence because that teacher could have potentially been or become a remote teacher, if not in that particular grade level, but another grade level. And then the last thing is that the remote classroom could be multi-age. When we were just looking at recent numbers, we had maybe 2 first graders across the district, and then we had 8 second graders. So in that particular case, the primary teacher would be able to do a kind of grade span of 1 and 2. We would never put kids in a remote option where it was a 2nd grade class and a 4th grade class. So we're really looking at 1 and 2 or 3 and 4. And again, depending on the numbers, if those numbers shift and grow, that particular class of split 1 and 2 could basically separate and be on its own. So those are that's Model A, and those are some of the benefits and challenge. And that's only applicable right now to grades K through 6. So let's talk a little bit now about the grade 7 and 8 full-time remote. So in the Model A, very, very similar to the Model A in the elementary level, a few different nuances, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But as far as benefits, again, we have that full alignment to the district academic programming. We have the availability of synchronous and asynchronous activities and Triton teachers. It also lends itself to moving between hybrid and remote more seamlessly. Some of the challenges, which again could be a challenge, is the 7th and 8th grade content classes will be combined. So at the elementary level where you have 1 teacher, and this particular model, there will be 1 remote teacher for math, 1 remote teacher for ELA, one remote teacher for science. And that particular educator, again, would be responsible in an 80-minute block teaching both 7 and 8. So they potentially could cut that learning time in half and deliver two different content areas. Again, those numbers could change depending on the enrollment. As far as the current remote schedule, that would change. So your child would have to shift as far as their what content areas are happening and when. You would have a new cohort of students and possibility of adding additional sections which could impact the class assignment. So just like, as I stated previously, they could be in a 7 and 8 combined science class, and one of those grade levels starts to really expand, then we may have to break that up into 2 if that is, the capacity is not there to provide the support and resources needed. So that's Model A for the 7th and 8th graders. Now I'm going to introduce, I already talked about these.
Actually, Kim, can I just pause for 1 second?
Sure, yep.
So just to confirm, and you said it, and I just want to reinforce it. So for Model A, which is the model that we are moving forward with for elementary, that means that we are collapsing classes that exist as of right now. So that is one of the discussions, as I said, that when we talked about what we had for available resources, we don't have, when we modeled this out at one point, we would need about $1 million to $1.5 million in new staffing to leave everything untouched and have all these other educators on hand. So as students choose this remote option, it decreases class sizes at the elementary levels, and we would be consolidating some classes at various grade levels across the 3 elementary schools. And that's how we would be freeing up teachers. In the middle school, that's the same way that would work. The difference being that would condense sections, not entire grade levels, as it's content based. So I just want to make sure that everyone heard that clearly, that implementing this remote option plan does impact classes across the board as those students come out of those classes that would be then shifting to hybrid with in-person learning. And we're going to have to collapse those classrooms, which means changes for students who might not even be in this remote option. So just want to make sure that was clear.
Thank you. So that was Model A. Now for Model B, I would say that was the largest request that we had from parents. Just really asking if, well, couldn't my child just attend class with the other students when they switch into the hybrid model and just not go into school during the in-person day and receive instruction or asynchronous activities outside of the classroom. And that model could become available. We've talked to the teachers, and they are all on board and really wanting to integrate those students into their classrooms, because it's important for the teachers to also continue to maintain those relationships. So I think that is a really strong statement, not just from our teachers, but just knowing that our parents continuously want that type of instruction as far as making sure that they have access to their current teacher. So again, that was a real positive. So what are the benefits then to this B model? It's fully aligned again to the district academic programming, because that's not changing at all. Synchronous and asynchronous activities, Triton educators, it certainly lends itself to moving between hybrid and remote options, just because it's taught by the same teacher, and it will follow the current schedule. Well, as far as challenges, it may be more difficult for the kids who are the fully remote option to stay at pace with the hybrid class. There will be a lot of new learning that will take place in person. We will obviously reflect that new learning in other types of asynchronous activities for those remote kiddos, but they will not have that opportunity to be obviously in person covering that same material. So their pace might be faster, or it could be slower. We're not quite sure, because we haven't been in this situation yet. There would definitely be more asynchronous activities because of that third bullet there, where you think about it, now a classroom that was divided and separated into 3 different learning models. So you have the students who are in front of you, you have the students who are remote hybrid, and now you have a full remote options. So that's really 3 different learning paths that an educator would be responsible for planning and teaching and assessing and providing feedback. So that is certainly going to be a challenge for some of these teachers, without a doubt. And again, depending on how many students will be integrated in, will really determine if this is an absolute possible option. So as far as 9 through 12, again, you're going to see some similarities, and you're going to see one particular difference with that. So with the students who are in high school, 9 through 12, Model B will absolutely be applicable as we are looking into that as an option. So the full-time remote model allows students to attend classes with and engage in similar work to the hybrid cohort that is at home. I just mentioned that whole different situation. They would continue to follow their current schedule. So again, that's with their current teachers, wrapping them into that hybrid model. Now, the other model that will be available only to the high school students is Model C, and that's the Florida Virtual School. That particular virtual school would give the students all of their curriculum, their programming, but it would be supported by the Triton educators. And our goal would be to identify one educator per content area, in addition to a remote coach. So the remote coach would be responsible for helping that child to access any of the curriculum or the different learning management systems, the platforms where they hold all of the curriculum. They would be responsible for making sure that they're organized, they understand their schedule, and so they would really be a person kind of behind the scenes making sure that all of those details are addressed. In contrast, the Triton educators would then serve as the content coach. So although they're not providing and planning for the content, they're checking in at least once a week to find out if there are any questions or additional resources those particular students might be in need of at the time. So those are 2 different support systems that we have or will have in place to support those students who would be opting into that Model C, if that is truly the course that we take. So again, I've already talked a lot about Model B, because that option is also available at the middle school. That's the model where the hybrid class will just integrate those students in that remote option in. So I've also already addressed the challenges. I'm going to take a little bit deeper dive then into that Florida Virtual School model, say. So you can imagine trying to coordinate all the different subjects and the courses and the schedules for high school students is certainly a greater task than it would be at an elementary or a middle school level. Students have a variety of courses and electives, and we're so proud to offer them and give them that opportunity. So again, the students have access to a full suite of courses, and that would be through that virtual Florida school. They certainly have a lot of different offerings, which is great. They have their own learning management system. It is not Google Classroom, so the students would need to learn how to get onto that system and then interact with that system throughout their learning. It is 100% largely self-directed and asynchronous, so kids can certainly set their own pace, and the teacher that they're working with can also set their own pace. Triton teachers will facilitate the learning. Not only will they have access to a content specialist, but as well as a coach, and it will provide obviously some flexibilities as the students' needs changes over the course of the year. So again, as far as challenges, this one has a price tag attached to it per student. And then as we look at numbers potentially increase, the capacity for Triton to provide those content specialists or the coaches to facilitate that virtual learning, which is so key and so important. The majority of the assessments are done online. I put this as a challenge as well as a benefit, is that it is self-directed and asynchronous, because interesting enough, there are certainly students who like to be on their own and want to just go with their own pace, and there are other students who really like that continuous check-in and support that they receive on a daily basis. And last is that the curriculum resources really could vary, making it challenging to move in from one course that's biology potentially through the Florida Virtual School to a Triton biology class. Granted, they both will be addressing the Mass State standards, but that class could be certainly at a different place within the year. So that's really that Model C, that Florida Virtual School. Brian, did I miss anything? Because I'm going to talk a little bit about what is the Florida Virtual School.
Sorry, I was muted.
That's
nope,
okay.
I think keep going with Florida Virtual. I think you've
okay. So I'm getting close to the end. So a lot of people were kind of surprised, and they really hadn't heard much about FLVS. FLVS was recommended by the Commissioner of Education. Remember early on I said as we had to develop these 3 plans, the Department of Ed was saying, you know what, we understand that that resources are limited. We want to provide you with a couple of different options that we're going to endorse. We're also going to provide it to you at a discount. And so they gave us 2 different virtual sites to choose from, and how involved those particular virtual schools were really determined by us. So that's where that name came from. And we obviously looked into it. We looked at different options. And this one seemed, we believe, is the best fit for what we can provide for students. So as I said, students will have access to a variety of courses and content levels. The platform is extremely extensive, and there's a lot of bells and whistles. The Florida Virtual School is one of the first virtual schools in the state. It's been around since 1999, believe it or not. And so they have really had time to really fine-tune what they have to offer, and all of kind of the different scaffolds and bells and whistles, if you would, to provide a really solid remote option. We are able to have our own teachers facilitate the coursework, which is great. So if we need to change the pacing or we have to add some additional supports, we have that availability. And then they do offer extensive training and support for any educator who will serve in that particular role, so that so students can continue with really some uninterrupted instruction. So that's really why FLVS came to be. I want to say FLVS is also used from many towns around us. Kentucky uses FLVS as one of their remote options. And then this is the kind of the breakdown as far as the roles and the responsibility of the educator team from Triton that would be involved in supporting that. We would have a remote learning tech integration specialist, and they really, like I said, would be behind the scenes, making sure the pace has been established, make sure the classes pretty much mirror as best as possible what the student is currently taking. And that also is, I had a couple questions where people asked if they were working on certain assignments, would that grade potentially be shifted over to their remote learning? Absolutely. We do not anticipate that or expect any child who is working hard up until this transition date, to lose the amount of work and that success that they have had. So again, that integration specialist would be working continuously with that content specialist and the coaches to make sure that the students have everything they need. We talked about the learning content specialist. They would be providing students with feedback. They would be assigning work and assessments. Some of the assessments are written because we want to make sure it's not just all online and multiple choice. We want to make sure that kids can demonstrate their knowledge. So they would be in charge of looking over those assignments and monitoring student progress. And then if there are some issues or the student needs some additional resources, they can intervene sooner as opposed to later. And then support students through weekly office hours. They would always have the availability for students. If needed, they would be able to answer questions. And so that's another great support. And then as far as learning coaches, like I said, they are about daily check-ins to make sure students are where they need to be. They have the resources. They would help the students really just kind of get organized and get acclimated to this new learning management system, and really kind of create that communication between the remote specialist, the content specialist, and what's happening with the student, to make sure all of these three pieces line up and are supporting each other in a really kind of in solid way, so that there are no gaps, and we're not just sending this child off to Florida virtual school, and we're not really making sure that we are paying attention to what that particular child needs throughout this learning process. So that's the educator team. And I think that is it. I am going to stop screen sharing, and then I'm going to open it up for discussions. I know that was a lot to absorb, and hopefully we can continue on with some questions and answers. So I would ask if you have specific questions related to just your child, that you reach out to myself or Anna Bates, so that we can kind of look at that individually, and then keep more general questions open to this group.
If I can just before we open up to questions, so just to confirm what Kim was saying, thank you, Kim, for that overview.
Yep.
The reason we are saying that there are options is that because the total number is going to be a driving force in what we're able to provide. At the elementary, as Kim presented, that is the option, right? There is no Florida virtual. We will be condensing classes, and we'll be condensing classes based on the total number. We might have only 13 kiddos in third and fourth grade, and so we have a kind of a combined class and combine one of those, or we might have one per grade level. That is in flux, but largely we can say that will be the elementary model. At the middle school and the high school, it will purely depend on the numbers of students who opt into this remote option. And Kim said it and I said it, and I want to say it again. Our preference, everyone's preference, is to have Triton educators working with our students from all perspectives, from the facilitating back and forth if we shift into hybrid and then back to remote, or if we're in hybrid and a student needs to be out because they're ill, or for whatever reason, the integration with our teachers and their classes is absolutely ideal. But as Kim mentioned, the Florida virtual is on the table because without kids integrated into the current classes, we just don't have the capacity to continue offering the breadth of programming. I believe as of last week, and numbers have continued to change, there were 141 different sections, classes at the high school that were implicated by the individuals who said that they were going to participate in the full remote option. So a student could have 4, 5, 6, 7 classes. So that was the reasoning, that if all of those kiddos were in one class like they are in third grade or fourth grade, it's a very different prospect, if you will. But at the secondary level, especially at the high school, even more so than the middle school, when we offer the breadth of programming and electives and all of that, there's no way to do that by consolidating classes. So certainly questions here. So those of you who are participating electronically, we'll come to you first, Leslie. So if you're on the Zoom via the connection, you can, on the bottom of the participants list, if you click participants, it pops up on the right or pops up on your screen, and at the very bottom, it gives you an option to raise your hand. That gives a little blue hand on the screen, so we know you've raised your hand. If you are connecting by phone, you should be able to raise your hand by dialing *9. That should work. I'm going to wait for the first hand blue hand to appear next to a phone number. But we're just going to go down the list. I'll just read names as we go down the list, and you can unmute yourself and have the opportunity to ask the question, and we will do our best to answer those questions for you. So let's start with Leslie Curran.
Is it me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Well, first of all, I just wanted to clarify. So you're definitely doing Model A for K to 6. That, did I understand correctly?
Correct.
So thank you. That's great news. I think that's the first time I've said that's great news in 2020. So that's great. So I just had one question about, I know you wouldn't be guaranteed your same teacher if you chose to return later. Would you still be able to go to the same school, I assume?
Yes, absolutely. So you would return to the same school, and at the elementary level, if we were shifting back, we likely wouldn't break apart this additional remote classroom if we were to shift back into remote, because that classroom in and of itself is going to create its own new community. So because it's so intact, that classroom will create its own community, learning community, pacing, and then that class would stay fully remote. Obviously, if a parent then elects later on, things change over the winter into the spring, and a family chooses to transition a student back, yes, they could transition back to the school. It may not be the teacher, especially if it was a teacher that was condensed because of those classes. Great question.
Thank you. Thanks for all the hard work.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go to Caterino 2.
Hello, it's Noah Caterino, and my daughter is in second grade in Newbury Elementary. Not to take up too much time, but I want to give kudos. Thank you so much for the research, the hard work, and we're very happy with the first few weeks of school.
Kat, your audio was I don't know what it was doing, but I want to mute you and try and unmute you. Can you hear us now?
Now? Sure.
We're getting like a clicking. It sounds like there's a machine or something interfering.
I'm sorry. You know what? I will call back on my phone and raise my hand again.
Okay. Okay, so we'll go to Heather Nowakowski.
Hi. I think you kind of answered one of my questions. So if they go remote, can you decide to change before, like, a vaccine or anything comes out? Like, if you decide remote is not working?
Absolutely, yes. This is, the department has stated that we are required to allow families to change back and forth with their term was reasonable notice. So in our plan, we requested and required that it be a 2-week notice, obviously for pacing, for shifting a student back in, that we would require a 2-week notice, with the caveat that if we land with an option where students are continuing with, at the high school level, if they're continuing with their teacher, then obviously transitioning back from remote back into hybrid or back and forth is a whole lot more simple because of the fact that they're maintaining their connection with the class, with the teacher, and the pacing and the learning. So again, all ideal if we can pull that off.
And if they have an IEP group, like if they go full remote, like the Florida thing,
Yep.
like if they have Mrs. C, let's say, do they still have access to them?
Yep. And I mean, David, and we can certainly jump in here, but absolutely any services that a student qualifies for, and again, I don't want to talk about anyone specifically in this recording, but anyone that is receiving, there are students who are on IEPs, obviously receiving services. There are students on 504 receiving services. There are students who are not on any plan, but receiving interventions at the elementary level. All of those, we will absolutely continue. And if the student isn't coming into the building, that precludes us from doing certain things that we would require to be in person, but students would still have access to those services. And that would be a team decision, as every case would be unique.
I just had one more quick question.
Sure.
Like honors classes, will those be covered too? I imagine yes. I just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
For high school level.
Yep. So I don't know, Kim, you want to mention, or it's through Florida Virtual Honors.
Yes.
AP is all still offered. So even if we shift to Florida, rather than being able to keep it in-house, all of those classes, there would be and some atypical, unique elective that Triton has that may not be available through Florida Virtual. but the majority of classes, AP honors, would all be offered through Florida.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Heather. All right, Claire.
Hopefully you can hear me without any interference.
We can hear you, yeah.
Perfect. So thank you for the different slides. They were very helpful. One of the questions that I had is, just so that I'm really clear, for the middle school and the high school, there's 2 options on the table for each school. And ultimately, it will be you guys that make the decision on which plan we're going for. So at some date, you'll say, okay, for middle school, we're going with, plan A. And then for high school, we're going to go with plan B or plan C. And you will make that decision when you have all your figures and your information in.
That is I'm glad you asked that question, Claire, because we keep talking option, and the option will be determined based on what we can do. Again,
it's not a choice.
It's not a choice, unfortunately. We wish we could offer 3 options.
Okay.
But yeah, so the options are, maybe option isn't the best term. I don't know if there's a better term, but it's the 2 choices that are on the table, and it will be driven by our resource and what we're able to offer. So we're working hard this week and working with teachers to see what is possible. Our goal is to have that decision made by the end of the week, to be able to give a firm answer by next week. And obviously, if we're in a place to have to shift on October 13th, that is 2 weeks from today. So we are under the gun.
And then once you've made the decision on the different plans, and maybe particularly so for the high school, if we go forward with the FLBS plan, and you are going into hybrid on October 13th, when will you, what date will you loop in kind of the coordinator and things like that to help define which courses the high school, because every student's going to have a lot of courses and they've got to align so the dates are kind of coming up pretty quick. Do you have we're going to make a target decision by the end of this week on which plans are going forward for each school, and then there's a target date next week that the coordinator is going to reach out to each family to help get everybody enrolled in the, do you have a date in mind for that? Because it's all pretty quick.
Yep. Yeah. Claire, you're perfect. You want to come join our team?
I know.
You are thinking exactly already what we have been thinking, and not just thinking, but we actually have scheduled training dates on this Friday. So we have everything set, just like you had mentioned, as far as it's a chain of events. If we go A, we have everything scheduled. If we go B, we have everything scheduled. So honestly, by next week, we'll have everything pretty much established, training dates. Those people who are going to move into that kind of remote coach or instructional person, there's some have already been told this could potentially happen. So we have those days and those events and those actions that need to happen are actually already in the calendar for starting Friday and then into obviously next week. So.
Okay.
Yep.
And then some of that communication will come out once you've made the decision on the plans to the parents.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
That's helpful.
All right. Oop, I'm up. Sorry. Charlotte Dowd. Are you there, Charlotte? I don't see her. All right. I'm going to go to Joe Atchison.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Joe and Sarah here.
Sarah.
We were just hoping you could clarify for the elementary school level for the hybrid model, what the in-school learning days will look like. Will the children still be learning on their Chromebooks, or and the second question is whether they'll be having recess and with their classmates.
Good question. You want to go, Kim, or?
Yep, I was just going to say, so tomorrow night, here's a plug for tomorrow night. We're going to be talking a little bit more about what that hybrid model will look like, and specifically related to those questions. But there will potentially be some times where the students will be working on their in the classroom on their Chromebooks. And there will be sometimes they will be doing paper pencil. They could be in a small group with that social distance of 6 feet. So it will really vary on what the teacher has in store as far as plans, objectives, and learning activities. But there absolutely will be opportunities and activities where the students will be still working on a Chromebook, and it could be doing something remote that the students outside of school could be working on as well.
Okay.
But we are looking to make the hybrid in-person day, and information was sent out earlier. That was another shift. We had anticipated remote learning days within the hybrid model. Monday will be largely synchronous and fully remote. Then the remote Tuesday or Thursday or Wednesday or Friday. We saw it more synchronous when we planned this out 7 weeks ago. Now, from a perspective of being able to have teachers focus on what we've learned from talking with our peers and families and other districts is if teachers have students with them in the classroom, using those 2 days to cherish the time together in person to maximize that in-person learning. And then the home-based or remote learning would be largely asynchronous with frequent check-ins. So each at the middle school and high school level, for each academic block period, would be taking attendance, and at the elementary level, each major academic transition would be just checking in live to make sure students are staying engaged throughout the day. Yes, recess. Yes, mask breaks. But by the same token, if you have seen pictures of the schools and you've seen what it looks like, it is certainly going to be a very different school than what we're used to having in place when students return. When desks are 6 feet apart, and cafeterias are set up with rows, kids facing the same direction one by one. So we will do our best to make it as normal as possible, but it will definitely be a unique setting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you both. So Bill McCormick.
Hey guys. First of all, and I don't know if everybody else has said anything, but I'll say this. I've been really pleasantly surprised by the options that have been offered. It's been great for kickoff for the first 2 weeks. The organization, the quality has been terrific.
Great.
My question or my plea, as a parent with 2 kids, I have one at Pine Grove and one at the middle school starting in 7th grade. The connections with the students and the connections with the teachers is really important. Whether we can have the kids safely go in the schools or not, I don't want to lose those bonds. And the choice you guys have presented to me is choosing between safety for my family versus the quality of education and connectivity for my children. And to me, those are the most important things. And I love the C option. I'd love to be able to keep my kids engaged with their classmates and with their teachers and still be able to choose to be remote, as an example for the middle school. That to me would be the best possible world. The question I have for you, because you guys are going to dictate, as you've said, we're going to sign up for options and you guys are going to make decisions. When we sign up for options, is it possible to say, for example, I have a son at the middle school. Can I say, I'm remote if it's option C, I'm hybrid if it's option B? Is that something we'll be able to choose in the survey?
There aren't a lot of screens on, but I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. So that wasn't part of the survey, but we can adjust that because I think
it's essential because I want to give you the best possible feedback about how I feel about the choices.
That's a great, I appreciate that. That is a great suggestion. We can absolutely capture that information. Yes.
Otherwise, I appreciate this tonight. It's been great feedback. And like I said, when we're ready to make decisions, we'll commit as best we can. And I just hope we have flexibility because it's all going to change. 6 months from now, 6 weeks from now, there might be a vaccine. Who knows?
Yep. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Martha Hubbard.
Hi. Thank you so much for this forum tonight. It's been really helpful in understanding what lies before you all. And thank you for all the work you've done over the summer and in this fall. It's just been very impressive and helpful to all of us. My question was very much, I think, answered by the last question that was asked, just about, I feel like we would go with option B for our high schooler, but probably not option C. And so just having the ability to give that feedback in the survey, I think, would be really important. And that's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Martha. And just so you know, if it was great to speak with you, Martha, but if your question was answered and you want to lower your hand, I forget how to do it because I don't have the button as the host, but I know there is a button to be able to lower your hand as well. So feel free. It's always great to say hi to people, but if you do want to lower your hand, you can do that. I believe on the phone, you can't do that. Joanna Manthorn. Oh, you just have to unmute yourself. There you go.
Oh, I got it. There we go. Apologies. I have a kindergartner, so this is all very new to me. So quick, very, very new to me. So quick question. If you end up seeing more kids than you expect going remote, do the ratios kind of stay standard in terms of how many kids you can have to a teacher? How does that work?
So, so the ratios don't change. So when we went through the process and arrived at using the 6-foot standard, right? Desi started with a 3-foot standard, and then the whole world said, really? No, the whole world uses 6 feet. So when we shifted to the 6-foot standard, we then, depending on the classroom, it's anywhere from 12 to 15 on some of the larger classrooms, students that we can arrange 6 feet apart at all times. So there, I suppose the question begs, do we get to a point where if half want to stay home and half want to come in, can we adjust to that? So my answer would be yes, we can. I don't think that would be a nice, clean, and linear path to that. But as we progress through the year, and certainly, as we're asking better questions, as Mr. McCormick suggested, that's a great question, right? So with the better data we get, the better we can adjust our plans. And that is a possibility. At this point, the initial kind of informal survey back, I believe it was August 23rd, we asked families to complete that. There was a lot of unknowns. From that, I was shy of 350 individuals said they would consider. Now we're in the mid 100s. I anticipate that after this call, and I guess you call this a meeting, not a call, but after this meeting, and this is posted online and people have a chance to hear some clarity, and hear that we're going to refine the questions, that might certainly change things, and we expect that number to grow, and in some cases, I guess it might shrink. But so at this point, I don't anticipate that the numbers would be to that level where we'd be ready to make that shift, where we would be able to say, okay, we can have anyone in person come every day because half of the students want to stay home and half of the students want to be in school.
And it would change.
Sorry, I didn't ask that properly, I think. What I meant is that
it was a great question, though.
I think there's no, I'm glad, and I hope it helps somebody. What I meant, right now, is there's one teacher, and I think there's maybe 16, 17, 18 kids in the class. If we ended up with 30, you can imagine, right? 30 kindergartners, 30 first graders, one teacher.
Yep.
So do we, so how is that being managed? Is there a set number, and then you say, okay, only X amount of kids per teacher?
Yes, we would absolutely, the same targets we've always used in kindergarten, we set no more than 20 with a class assistant. We want 20 at the primary grades, low 20s, upper elementary, and so forth. So we will absolutely maintain those positive ratios because we would be in hybrid and shifting, in half of the class coming each day. 22, 23, 24 is okay, but we certainly would not be shifting to 30 in the anticipation that someday, we don't know when, everyone will be shifting back in. And when we do that, we would have to then re-engage that other teacher that was out and working with remote students, and it would balance. So unfortunately, the downside, or the kind of the impact of this, is that where we usually set teachers and create a community, right, for the entire year, that will shift now, and there's a potential in the future that could shift again. But we would maintain those appropriate class sizes for sure. Yeah.
Okay, great. And thank you for all you're doing, because it's not easy, and I like that every time new information comes in, you evolve, and I think that's what's important. So good job.
I appreciate that, Joanna, and that I think is probably something that is frustrating. Because what we've tried to do all along is evolve, but I know that means parents have to be flexible. And we could have committed to something a month ago and we probably would have had to change it on people. So I appreciate that flexibility, because if we can all be flexible and evolve, then in the end, when we shift, we will be able to offer the best possible product for our students, regardless of the choices of the family. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Erica Jacobson, I saw you.
Hi, thank you so much. I want to thank everybody for their diligence and efforts that they've put in here. I know I've peppered a lot of you with emails, and thank you for being so responsive. I very much, Bill raised the issue that I wanted to raise, which was the first survey that was put out was, I write market research surveys and analyze data for a living. It may have been, you may have skewed your own results by the way you wrote your questions. And so I really think that a better way is to kind of think about the rewording. I would be happy to put our experts, test anything, run it by us, and we would be happy to give you our fellowship speak on how we rank choice things that way. Excellent. So that you give parents the opportunity to say, I would pick B if it's remote, but if it's this Florida Learning Academy, I'm going to say no, and I will send my children hybrid and then pray and hope that it's going to work. So I think that you need to work on the data collection side a little bit and how you're interpreting the results as well. I do like the Model A, but I think that's kind of giving parents a schematic of what you're making a decision between and what's within a parent's choice and what's the district is making the choice between would be really helpful at this point in time. Just a simple one slide table. I sketched something for while I was sitting here.
Well, do send it to us, please.
I'll take a picture.
And if you've written the survey while you're there as well, Erica,
Send that too. Yeah.
Send that.
Spend my time figuring out like how to get you to get buy a new credit card and which credit card offers. This is more interesting. But I really do. I think that if we focus on how parents are able to get feedback and give it in a way that allows them to share a little bit more, it may be more helpful in your decision making. Right. And I'm happy to weigh in and help. I really do want to see the district succeed, and I'd love to see as many of our kids be able to stay within the district. So
I appreciate it, Erica. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Melissa Goldner.
Hello.
Hey there.
So I actually just had a point of clarification because I know that it was clarified with the middle high school, and I just wanted to clarify for the elementary level. When we're taking the survey, our responses are going to dictate what the district does. We don't get to say like, oh yeah, I'm going to do Model A. Mm-hmm. That it may not be unavailable to us. It's basically for your information, and then you're going to say, okay, yes, Model A is what it's going to be, or no, actually Model B is what it's going to be. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So at the middle school and high school, we would whatever the term is, we would adjust the survey so that parents would be able to say, yes, if it's this, no, if it's that. At the elementary level, the option A is the only option we're moving forward. It's the Cadillac option where we have our educators cohorted and working with a contained cohort of remote students. So at the elementary, it'll be a straightforward, this is the model, do you want to participate? And then at the secondary level, we would have those little caveats.
Excellent, thank you. And just like a little plug for your teachers, Model A, it does seem like the catalog for everybody, and I, as a teacher, cannot imagine the lesson planning that's going to be involved for Model B. So for anybody who is not an educator or is not related, like involved in education, Model B is a lot of planning. Yeah. It's a lot of time. So
it is.
Thank you guys, everything for what you're doing. I always love listening.
Thank you, Melissa. Appreciate it. And I will send that plug along to the teachers, because we've had lots of conversations with teachers, and teachers want to make this work. Yeah. So fully understanding what this means. So again, we have to make sure that it's feasible and it doesn't become completely undoable. But again, that would be the ultimate goal. Okay, not Melissa Goldner, but Melissa G.
Hi.
All right.
Okay. So I guess I'm understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but obviously based on how the survey turns out, participation numbers and obviously resources is going to drive which model in terms of the middle high schools are going to be chosen.
Yeah.
So here's just a weird question, but I have visualized multiple times that some of these kids who are so excited, and even parents who are so excited for their children to have the opportunity to go back hybrid, may be faced with a reality of a school scenario that looks very different than what these kids are hopeful for in terms of their ability to have real social engagement, and even what it looks like to have to spend your day with a mask on, 6 feet apart, eating lunch at a desk and all those things. And there may be some kids that go in thinking, yep, I want hybrid. I'm sure there are plenty of parents who aren't even considering this as an option right now, but may be forced to ultimately look at this as an option. If those parents then reach out to you and say, hey, listen, this didn't work out, this hybrid thing is not working, and we need to get my kid into a full remote option, what kind of impact is that going to have if we're looking at only numbers on what plan we go with based on survey?
So that's a great question, Melissa. So if that, when we make a decision, we ultimately make a decision, we have to assume what you just said is a very real possibility. We've had the discussion many times, right? That everyone, and we, until we set up the schools this way, we envision school very differently. And then when you set up the classrooms and the cafeterias and the spaces and realize what this looks like, it changes your perspective. So we fully expect that people, students, families, are, like you just said, are excited, thrilled, can't wait to get back and just see friends. But then when they get back in and see the reality, we're hoping that we can make it, whatever it is, appropriate enough. We have to maintain safety and all that, but also make it engaging enough so students want to be there, obviously. But if families do make that choice, we have to build in some buffer in our assumptions about how we, when we're making that final decision. So that's absolutely something we've talked about, I would say very routinely, that reality. So if we're on the cusp of the numbers being too great for us to do internally, then we'll have to make the choice for Florida virtual, because we know there'll be folks who come back and then shift to remote. So that's a great question, but we'll have to make an assumption as we make that final decision.
Okay. And one final thing, just I know I sent emails and things like that out, and I do want to thank everyone. Again, this is such a monumental situation, and I appreciate everything. I would like to say I really truly do think that while I do think it would be a massive undertaking for our teachers, who are amazing, and I think we have some of the best educators in the state by far, I do think they're up to the task. If there's some way we can continue to just allow people who do choose the remote option to just sort of follow that same schedule that the hybrid kids would be doing, I think it would be so much better for our kids. I really fear for the high school level kids with the Florida Learning, and also if you, even in that group A situation, at the middle school level, I'm talking, I am concerned about how they will eventually blend back in and be completely in the same level. I think if we can somehow keep that group, that plan B option available at both levels, I just think in the end, it's going to be the best way to ensure that everybody is getting the same level of education and staying more connected with their community and their friends. So I just wanted to say that.
I appreciate
Thanks.
that, Melissa. And I don't think anyone in any of the schools, or I can certainly speak for Anna and Kim and the principals, that's absolutely, and teachers, that's what we want to happen. That is the best case scenario. And it will only be if we literally feasibly cannot do it that we wouldn't choose that option. So that's a great point. Caterino 2, you're back. I didn't get your name. I apologize.
Is this any better?
There it is. Yes,
Okay.
Much better. Thank you.
My microphones were confused.
Okay. Now you're loud and clear.
I wanted to start by echoing the other parents that we are extremely happy with the educators at NES. My daughter's in 2nd grade, so we're still relatively new, but our teacher is just killing it. She's doing a great job. So yay, 2nd grade.
Yay. Shout out to all the teachers. Absolutely.
My questions are as follows. So in second grade, I'm worried that if we stay remote while everybody else goes to hybrid, that she'll lose that connection with the teacher and all the great things that come along with teachers. As a parent, we can get so far and we can probably get the information in, but we don't have the specialness that comes with the teacher. Yep. So what touch points would an elementary school child have with a teacher, and would that just be for check-ins, or would there be any actual teaching that would happen?
So again, we're talking about the remote option. If you chose the remote option,
yes,
I'll let Kim jump on that.
So your child at the elementary level would have a very similar experience that they're having currently. It may not be with the same teacher or the same students, but they would have touch points. They would have morning connections, afternoon connections. They would have live instruction. So it would be the full remote model that they're experiencing now. And there would be a lot of times throughout the day that they would have those connections and engagement opportunities with the teacher and other students.
Okay, so it wouldn't just be, okay, hop on Reflex, okay, hop on Epic. Okay, so they would still have some teacher instruction.
Absolutely.
Maybe a different teacher, but it would still be a teacher. Okay, and then my other question is in regard to hybrid. I understand that mask breaks are planned, but how long will they be? How often and how are they going to be implemented, if you know that at this point?
I'd say as a general rule, we were saying that there'd be a 15-minute break in the morning and the afternoon. Obviously, recess would be a point, but if students are out at recess, then they have to be 6 feet apart without their mask. For students who have been in school, high priority students, in speaking with principals at the elementary level, when they do recess, kids have had masks on because they've chosen to play on the play structures. So if they stay masked, they can, occasionally come within 6 feet of people and be okay. But there would be a morning and an afternoon, and obviously during lunch when students are seated in the cafeteria, they would remove their mask to eat and put it back on. That, beyond that, we're going to trust the professional discretion of teachers that depending on the weather, if it's a hot day, I know you've probably all worn masks when it's hot and stuffy. It's a very different thing than when it's, haven't worn a mask yet in the winter, but when it's the air condition is blaring, it's a very different comfort level and in breathing. So certainly we'll trust the professional judgment of the teachers, and if more breaks are needed, that would certainly be at the discretion of the teachers and working with the principal as well. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much.
Certainly. All right, Douglas Wynn. He's still with us. Doug Wynn.
Hi, can you hear me?
There you are, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Thanks so much for taking such a cautious and thoughtful approach to all of this. We really appreciate that. I just want to confirm that I understand a few things that I think I understand so far with these moving targets. One is we had received an email for our middle schooler about the Florida program. Is it correct that will not be on the table for middle school?
Thank you for clarifying. Yes, that has come off the table since last Monday.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Then my next question is, we've been hearing that it will be possible for students to transition from remote to hybrid with a 2-week notice. My question is, does something like the reverse apply? My student is loving his teachers, and he's disappointed to think he might have Florida, but he's not sure if hybrid will be a good experience for him. So if he's tempted to try hybrid because he wants to keep his teachers, but if he finds that a day with the mask on is not what what he's ready for, moving from that to full remote, is that an option that you guys are considering?
Absolutely. And then the only caveat I would say is if you said middle schooler. So again, both of those options, we'd be likely using middle school personnel and staff. So the transition is very different. If we were having to transition a high school student to Florida virtual, there's a registration process and time to get the student enrolled in classes and up and running. So there would be, we would say, that reverse 2-day or 2-week window. Hopefully we could do it sooner than that, but assume that it would be a 2-week window to shift if we landed in that Florida virtual. But at the elementary or middle school, there would be a transition, but I don't believe we would need the 2 weeks on the reverse. But you would have that option for sure. Yeah.
That's great. That's very good to know. And his concern, of course, is then can he stay with the same teachers? It sounds to me like the A or B plan, that's uncertain, right? It might be a different set of teachers in middle school if he were to transition from hybrid to full remote.
Potentially, yes. Yep. Yep.
And my final question seems trivial, but he's very excited about middle school band, and in full remote, I'm wondering if there's any ability to participate in that.
So that's a great question too, and these are all topics that we've had talked about. So obviously it's hard to participate remotely in certain things. Things like band and any choral singers at the high school, anything where people are singing, PE classes are more restricted. If there is a way for us to make sure they stay engaged, we will move forward and find a way to make that happen. I know teachers and the people who, all the visual and performing arts folks or other folks that run these clubs and activities, if there's a way to work your child in remotely, and or if it's a small group and you felt comfortable bringing a student on campus for a specific event, then your son would absolutely be able to continue with that. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's all good news. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Doug. All right, Amy Amato. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you are.
Hi. So first of all, my stepson graduated from Triton High School, and we're very much appreciative of that system. His name is George Pickett. He went to the Marines. It was a great experience for our family. Yeah, so what I would say, though, is funny, awkwardly enough, we now have a kindergartner, and yeah, it happens. So just two really quick questions. One is that, I'm an old lady. I'm gonna make sure she's still remote for the time being. Mm-hmm. But what are the options, or how much notice I need to give the school if I wanna actually take her into a hybrid situation?
So in the kindergarten level, we would be able to do that more quickly than, like I was saying, at the high school level, where if we ended up with the Florida virtual. So there still would be a transition back. There'd be a time to transition out, but we would be able to make that happen.
And a big shout out to Ms. Townsend. But the second question is, if we did choose to have our children go hybrid in kindergarten, what are the options for the other days? Because I assume they're like, maybe hybrid is like probably 2 days a week, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so how would is that still a kind of a virtual experience for the other three, or do they take a day off?
Yeah, so it's still a kindergarten is falling under that same hybrid model where Monday would be fully remote, and then depending on cohort A or B, in school Tuesday, Thursday, home Wednesday, Friday. We have had discussions. There's been lots of discussions about delineating kindergarten as a high priority. We delineated preschoolers as high priority, and so those students are coming in for a shortened day, but for their full preschool full preschool schedule. We've been talking about trying to find a way to do that for kindergarten. Kindergarten class sizes are large enough that we would have to still split them. So we've talked about AM, PM. I've talked to some parents where to shift all of a sudden you're an AM session and be a PM session would be problematic for daycare. So we're still working towards possibilities with that. But at this point in time, they'll follow that same cohort hybrid schedule for the half day.
And that's totally okay. Thank you.
Great.
That's
All
my
right.
only question.
All right. Thanks, Amy. Shauna McGee.
Hi, Kim. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Shauna.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you for this. It's been very helpful. I just indulge me for a second as I'm trying to walk through at the elementary level what it's going to look like curriculum-wise, hybrid versus remote. Because as I play it out in my head, I see the full remote students making it much further in the curriculum than I see the hybrid students as was described in today's model, the updates that were released today, and how is that going to be reconciled?
So I would say that as far as the pacing or the expectation, first let's talk about that. The expectation is that we are able to cover, or our goal, let's put that way, our goal is to cover a year curriculum. We know that trying to kind of pivot between the students in person and the students outside of school, it's going to be obviously have some obstacles. I think as far as the hybrid, I think of any kind of new topics that will be discussed could potentially addressed in person, and then folks who are outside of that in the hybrid model be working on either they've already been introduced to the lesson, so they're doing kind of that independent or guided practice. It could be with a support personnel, or it could be independently. It could also be skill work that they're doing at home, skill work that they potentially could have been working on in school, but we really want to capitalize on that time. And all of that to say, there's no way that we can predict, I guess, which model kids will get further in the curriculum. And that's just, even last year, we have kids starting, and the range where they're starting at will vary. I would say we will continue to monitor their progress through, the iReady assessments to see how close they are in achieving where they need to be at any particular time. And then if we see any particular pockets of students who are falling behind, then we'd have to really get together with the teacher, the reading and the math specialist, and find out how we can add some additional supports. I think the biggest thing, knowing that this is a new situation, but we certainly can collect some type of progress monitoring data to see where they are in their kind of educational journey and getting through the curriculum and understanding the curriculum. But I do agree that there will absolutely most likely be some differences between how far the kids get. And then next year, we will continue to address those, because even from the spring, we know that the starting point for many of these students is at very different places. So we will work collaboratively with the teachers and the specialists to figure out plans as we adjust.
Okay. Yeah, because if you're in a dedicated remote classroom with your own teacher and you're having live instruction every day, it's going to look very different than if you're in person one day and then sent home with skill work or whatever, like you said.
Yep.
So I just wanted to clarify that. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Shauna. There was a question that actually someone added through the chat about if we go full back, and I'm assuming that means full in person, would these options still be available? And absolutely. So again, just to clarify, when we use the word options, where we will have to select one pathway, one model for each of the levels. So we can tell you model A will be the choice for elementary. Middle school will either be our educators wrapping students in or collapsing classes to make remote classes. A high school level, it'll either be our educators roping students in or including students, or the Florida virtual. But none of this, parents won't be making the choice of which of those options. It's choosing to be remote or not be remote, and then we'll ask additional questions to make sure that we understand that your answer may change depending on the path we choose. So how about Susan Carter-Krigman? You still with us? We've lost a couple people. Susan. No Susan.
I'm here.
Oh,
I'm
there you
here.
are.
Yeah, I'm trying to find me. Sorry. Hold
That's
on.
okay.
Every time I go to the camera, I get something that says rename, and it won't let me hit the camera button. But
So we can hear you.
Okay, so Oh gosh. Okay, so I have a 5th grader and an 8th grader.
Okay.
Let's just touch on the middle school thing first. So if we choose the remote option, and the content, there'll be a teacher for math, for ELA, for science, and then will they be having teachers for specials and like Joshua started Spanish? Will they be having those teachers anymore?
Yeah.
Or someone to stand
Yep.
in?
Yep. So those classes would rotate through the same, and we would cover those classes remotely. Yep.
Okay, but they may have different teachers than they have now teaching them.
One of the options, they would have different teachers,
Mm-hmm.
still middle school teachers, if we can find a way to include those students in their existing classes and schedule, they would have the same teachers. But yes, one of the options, one of the possibilities, we'll call them possibilities, one of the possibilities would be that they would have different teachers.
Okay. And then for elementary school, sorry, I got a lot of stuff written down here.
That's okay.
So if my daughter has band lessons, that teacher will keep addressing her music in a remote situation.
So there are certain things that we're not sure, we have to figure out how to do remotely.
Okay.
But if we can continue them remotely, then yes, we would. Yes.
Okay, and because singing and playing instruments is more dangerous with the COVID situation, if they do the hybrid model, are they actually going to be having band and chorus type meetings?
We have not ruled any of them out, and teachers and instructors are being incredibly creative in finding ways to make them still happen, and to have, particularly at the high school level where you have a senior who's done marching band for 4 years and wants to, so they're trying to find creative ways. So certain things like the competitive marching band season at the high school has been canceled, but at the elementary level with instrumental and choral, still trying to find creative ways to do that. We can hold classes outside for those types of activities. So still working on a way to call that possible, but at this point, it hasn't been ruled out. Yeah.
So we did the elementary models, then we did the middle school models, then we did the high school models. So I'm trying to remember the elementary models, and I didn't have time to read that.
No, that's okay.
Came through at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. So so the elementary model is, we would be, depending on the numbers, we would be collapsing existing classes across all 3 elementaries and freeing up classroom teachers as numbers drop. So if families are choosing the remote full time, and numbers would drop in classes, and then we would reallocate and condense those classrooms, and it would be a very similar situation to what your child is experiencing now.
Right, but a different cohort and probably a different teacher.
Probably a different teacher.
But what I was wondering is if there aren't, if there aren't that many who choose the full remote option, if it is possible for the classroom teachers to include those few students at home in their daily lessons with the teachers that they have now.
I think based on the numbers we have right now, I believe we already have numbers that would suggest that's not possible. The numbers are great enough. However, if it is lower numbers, that is a possibility. That would be by school grade level. But the looking to the middle school and high school, where we would like to be able to keep students in their classes and shift remotely, it would have to be less synchronous learning, right? So if I'm currently in a AP physics class at the high school, and right now it's largely synchronous because the whole class is at home, I wouldn't ever have that in-person in learning. So they would definitely be a loss in that regard. But teachers would work with students, so it would be different, but it's still a possibility. But I think the numbers, I believe as of today, the numbers are already probably too great to say at the elementary level
Okay, so a lot of people still choosing remote is
Yeah,
what you're saying.
yeah,
Okay, yeah, because that's the way we're probably going. But my question is, if they do start the hybrid model, what were the numbers that would have to have them cancel that and go back to remote, as far as how many, if a COVID case comes up, is it 1 case, 2 cases, 3 cases? What's the guidance for that?
So the metric, I don't have the metric in front of me. So the metric that the school committee will use tomorrow night includes testing capacity, tracing capacity. The standard is fewer than 3 new cases in a school over the past 2 weeks, spread out at least over 2 households. So there's some sort of, I won't call them convoluted, but a little more complex. But it's not a massive number. But that is a discussion that the committee will take up tomorrow night. That is the metric that they set. Certainly, they have the right to adjust that metric, but that's the metric they'll use tomorrow night in determining whether or not we'll be shifting to hybrid.
Okay, so it could. Okay, I'm not sure if we're talking about the same thing. I know about the metric for like Massachusetts. How low in order to start schools again, that sort of thing. But I'm not sure you answered it. If we go back to a hybrid model and someone in the school has tested positive for COVID, then like how much of that happens before it shakes it up and sends it back into remote learning?
So that is what, that metric that the school committee determined of the standard to shift to hybrid. We haven't had a separate rubric or a metric to say, is there a different metric that once we're in hybrid to shift back to remote? My understanding is we would use that same metric in reverse. So if we meet the metric and all the different aspects of it now, if we then ever are no longer meeting those aspects or those different qualifiers, then we would potentially shift to remote. But it would be a vote of the committee. There is no automatic number by which we would automatically shift.
Okay, and that seems like if there was concern that they would switch them back pretty quickly to the full remote.
Yeah, absolutely, right. So this would not be something we would hang around and wait on. I certainly have the authority to, like a snow day and call off school. So I would be prepared to take immediate action if there was something of grave enough concern, while the school committee gathered quickly to be able to assess and take formal vote to close schools back down, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just so you know, we really enjoy your snow day messages.
Well, I don't think there will be any this year because they'll be remote
That's
days,
what I'm saying. So.
But maybe I had a challenge that I think the next one needed to be, there was some meme running around and it had to be sung to like 50s Broadway tunes. So if anyone has the props and any things ready to go, I'm game.
That sounds fun.
All right.
Okay, well, I'm a music teacher, so I'll see what I can figure out for that.
Great. I appreciate that, Susan. Challenge accepted.
Brian, thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Take care. All right. Bridget is next. Is Bridget still with us? Bridget.
Hello.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm well. How are you yourself?
Doing well, thank you.
So I have a few questions on the elementary. I have my son is in 4th grade.
Okay.
So in spring, the remote was really difficult for my child, and for myself as well. It created a lot of anxiety and stressors and just a chaotic scene. So obviously, when I filled out my form, I was like, if there's a hybrid, then he's going. But since then, this remote session has been incredible with him. He's learning time management by setting his own timer on the iPad, and it hasn't been a problem. Like, he's like total 360. So my question is I know that you want to go with the Model A. I get that. But if as the PTAs of, I'm obviously part of the PTA. Is there a way for us to help you in the elementary schools, if all three of us PTAs combined were to donate money to get webcams for the classrooms so that our students can continue with the model just like this is and be included in with the hybrid students. Is that possible? Because then at that point, the teacher's not directly talking to just either the hybrid or the remote. She's talking to everybody as a class. And then maybe there could be a parent moderator for the children that are on remote that, you know, is from home, but is able to kind of make sure that the kids are, you know, staying on task for the teachers. Is there, I mean, is that even a possibility at this point? Because I know that a lot of us parents are, you know, for me, this model is actually working for my son.
Absolutely.
And I would love for him to go back. I would, but I mean, obviously with everything kind of happening and with, you know, the positive case that we've just kind of experienced, it's kind of getting a little bit more scarier. And so it's just a matter of like, winter's coming, the flu's coming, this is still here. There's just so many variables that if this is working for my son, I really don't want to pull him from it. You know what I mean?
Yep. No, it's a great question. So in regards to the model, so while we would be collapsing classrooms and reassigning remote students to new teachers, your son would be experiencing we'd have the same experience he's having now. While he would have a different teacher, he would have that same routine, synchronous streaming, lessons, routine engagement all day with the teacher. So while there would be a different teacher, he would have a very similar experience to what he's having now. The converse of that is we do have webcams. Teachers have both Chromebooks, and then on their desktops now they have webcams. As an educator, it's not as simple as simply turning a camera on and streaming what's happening in the classroom. When teachers are doing, if you could have it's amazing to watch. So if you look in some of these teachers' classrooms while they're teaching remotely, it's like a sound studio. They've got cameras and this and dot cameras and lights, and that works well for teaching remotely. It's a very different setting. Obviously, you've been in classrooms before. You know what it looks like when you're working with students. Teachers, especially at the elementary level, don't stay still, right? They're around, they're in groups, they're around the entire the classroom. So we've talked about that, the streaming option. I think in the hybrid model, there certainly will be places, primarily at the secondary level, where that wouldn't necessarily be the primary use, but that might happen more routinely. But at the elementary level, that's a very challenging model to put in place, for sure.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bridget. Amy Golbitz, are you still with us?
Yes, hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, thank you for having this meeting. It's been very helpful.
Thank
Two
you.
questions. First is regarding Model B for high school students. I just want to be clear, from the sounds of it, it appears to me that if the Model B is chosen, if that's the model that you guys choose for remote, it appears that those children that are in remote, they won't they'll be part of their class, but when the class is actually in the building, they won't be participating in that class live via a webcam or something like that. They will just be given the assignment of the day, asynchronous, like, you know,
Asynchronous.
correct?
Like, yes. Yep.
So they won't get the actual classroom instruction via webcam because of the reasons you just described to the previous caller.
Yeah, so I don't want to say never, but at the secondary level, it likely will happen more frequently, but it won't be the norm, right? So certain types of content. So when learning is happening one way, when I'm at the board explaining a problem, that's easy. That's one way students are receiving, I'm teaching. The majority of instruction, quality instruction, is a back and forth. So it's the back and forth that becomes the challenge.
Yep, understood. Okay, I just wanted to be clear that I understood that model. The other question I did have was related to testing. I'm pretty sure when I looked at the plan briefly regarding going back to hybrid and and all that, that there wasn't any requirement or plans for testing the students regarding COVID. And so I was wondering why that isn't the case, and if there's any consideration to doing that with the children.
We have talked about that. I don't know of any public schools that are testing students. We also talked about the concept of screening on a daily basis at the door. I mean, we could talk about thermal scanners and taking temperatures. Ultimately, it comes down to a discussion of cost, and if what we're able to say and exclude a student from a public school for is very different. So my daughter, when she went off to a private college, couldn't come in unless they walked in with a negative COVID test. That's different than a public school. And so the challenge of saying you can't come back to school unless you have a negative test in hand is one challenge. And then on top of that, if we're requiring it, then we are shouldering the cost of that test. So it came down to a matter of cost for staff, for students. It's not off the table, and certainly if there was a way that we could find to do that, that would certainly be helpful. You know, we've shied away from temperature screening at the front door because obviously temperature is not a great gauge, and it's also, you know, more often it's a false negative or a false positive. When students' temperatures are elevated, especially young kids. So, you know, there's things that we've looked at, but at this point, we do not have a plan in place and don't anticipate putting a requirement for testing in place for students.
No, okay, thank you. I appreciate you giving some consideration to that, and
Sure.
I appreciate your answer. Thanks so much.
Great, thanks, Amy. Someone asked a question on the chat about in the full option, how will grading take place? So if it was the Florida virtual, it would be through Florida, but we are still required to assign grades. So the grading would still happen in both models. In all of these models, it still would happen through Triton educators and within the Aspen system, which is our system for tracking grades. Is that an accurate statement, Kim?
Yeah, and I was just not to piggyback on that, but to also just kind of pull a question from the group chat that has not been addressed tonight, is that, so if you had a student who was enrolled kind of in that hybrid model, and for whatever reason that child potentially had to quarantine for 2 weeks or leave that classroom for any extended time, would they automatically be put into that remote section? And the answer is no, they would not. The classroom teacher would be responsible to provide work and remote experiences for that child. They would not automatically get put into a kind of that track of remote option. They would still be the classroom teacher's responsibility.
That's a great question. One other question, questioned about what is the timeline? So when would teachers at the, you know, specifically the question was in elementary, when would that be announced of which classrooms we're collapsing and such? We are still hoping to have parents commit, and again, rewriting surveys questions to allow you to commit with a caveat by Thursday. That allows us to start that work on Friday, over the weekend, quite literally, and into next week to make sure that we're in a place to be notifying individuals that would be affected, either because people are choosing remote or if individuals are affected because of a class that has been collapsed because the size is shrunk, that we would be in a place to notify folks next week. So another question about air filtering in the schools. So we actually will be presenting tomorrow night a report to the school committee in regards to a complete assessment of every room literally every space in the entire district. We assessed for air exchanges per hour and have initial assessments back that show very favorable ratings after spending a considerable amount of money and upgrades and maintenance on systems. But we will, that is in place. And then in areas where it's not ideal, we would put HEPA filtration in place. So I'm gonna go back to live questions. So who haven't, Vanessa Rossi. Are you still with us, Vanessa?
How you doing? It's actually Michael. It's Vanessa.
Michael.
But thank you guys for hosting once again, and for everybody for in the district for listening as well. One thing I heard was happening in an adjacent district was that with a hybrid situation, the teachers in some instances weren't actually teaching in the classroom in front of the kids that were there, but that they were actually, so kids would go into the classroom and the teacher would actually just be on a screen at home because it was their choice. The district gave them the choice to either teach from home or in the classroom live. So is that a choice for the teachers in this district? Because I think obviously that presents a different scenario for any choices that parents would make in terms of the benefit of having in-person instruction.
That's a great question, Mike. So that has been an option while we are in remote. When we shift to live in-person instruction, teachers are required to be teaching from the buildings. The vast majority of teachers, I'm sure parents are on this call, who have been, even when they had the option, are teaching from their classrooms because it's the better place to teach from as an educator. That said, what I have to put on that as a caveat is we are required, as any other employer would be, to make reasonable accommodations for folks who have a documented, what the word term is, a disability or medical condition or something that would qualify them for protections under ADA. So certainly we are reviewing all of those on a case-by-case basis. But I would say to your point about teachers teaching remotely on a screen with students sitting in a classroom, that is not something that we anticipate setting up as a teaching and learning model within the district.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. One other
sure, yeah.
One other question, which now that I've hurried to raise my hand, I forgot what the question was. If I think of it, I'll raise my hand again. Sorry.
I'll leave it raised and we'll come back to you. All right, Shannon.
I'm here.
Hi, Shannon.
I'm gonna, if you would like to come back to me, someone just one of my vehicles outside, and you'll notice I have a little background noise. So,
all right.
That would be great for a couple minutes.
I lowered your hand, so raise your hand when you're ready again. All right, Diane Carroll. I believe I saw Diane. There you are. Unmute. There you are.
Information. Okay.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for holding this meeting and providing all this information.
Certainly.
I have a couple of questions. I have a student at the high school who is enrolled in a couple of music classes during the day. They're both basically half-time and equal one full-time class. And if the student ended up having to go to the Florida plan, what would happen with those music classes that, as I said, represent one full class credit and are required to meet the graduation requirement of credit?
Yep. So if we move to the Florida model and there is a class that wouldn't be offered, that's a commensurate course through Florida, then we would certainly accommodate those courses within Triton. Certainly, again, if we can, the ideal is we're not moving to the Florida virtual and we're staying with Triton educators, which would obviously solve that problem out the gate.
That is absolutely the best model.
Yep. But it would be very different, again, in that it wouldn't be, if the student isn't participating in that in-person learning day, that wouldn't be replaced by live streaming all day. It would be a largely asynchronous learning experience, but still under the guidance of the Triton teacher who your son started the year with and working with the same educators and expectations. So that's certainly
right. Well, here's the thing about those classes. So it's just to be specific, jazz band and jazz choir, they meet alternately on Mondays, every other week. Wednesday is the day that jazz band meets for 90 minutes. And Friday is the day that jazz choir meets for 90 minutes. If your kid is in cohort A, they're never going to be in the building when those two classes meet.
So the days will actually rotate, and we're not going to get into the high school schedule because I will get lost, and your son could probably school me on it. But right now, the days are 1 through 5. It will actually be 1, 2, 4, 3, 5, so that every student has, for their A through G periods, has one 90-minute block in person and one 90-minute block remotely.
Okay. I guess the other thing I wonder about, because the high school classes, especially when you get up to being a senior, they're different electives. For example, I'm talking about political science and journalism. So again, if you had your kid having to do the Florida plan, what type of classes would they have access to? Would they have access to a political science class or a journalism class?
Kim, do you want to take that? I know.
Yeah, I'm going to pop that one over to Anna because I know she's looked more extensively at the course selections and specifically.
Sure. So in those two examples, both journalism and political science are offered through Florida. There are a variety of courses in all disciplines and also levels within that, so that students could be taking courses at the CP, the honors, or the AP level in some different ones. So with the families that had sort of expressed interest in this remote option by probably 2 days ago, I pulled all the high school schedules and ran them next to the Florida offerings. And I think we can accommodate 80-90% of the courses that they're taking at Triton through Florida. There are some, though, some very specific electives that we would have to figure out how to work that out with our own educators at Triton. But I was really impressed with the offerings, and I think that's one of the reasons that DESE partnered with the Florida Virtual School, is because of this breadth of offerings that they had.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks, Diane. Shannon, are you back?
We're going to try to be back. We'll see how this goes. You know, I wonder how the kids learn during the day with the dogs around, but
exactly.
You know, they seem to handle it better than I can. Guys, thank you so much. I mean, you know, I've been attending and trying to listen into as much of what's going on as possible. One of my kids' biggest concern, and they're older, I have middle school and high school, and trying to figure out what their best path forward is they feel like they don't know the specifics of the safety measures that are in place when given consideration to the hybrid. You know, one's a sophomore, so she's like, I know what it looks like to get off the bus and be jammed in through the doors to get into the high school. How are we controlling it? You know, for kids who can't use sanitizer, how are we handling those things? So I'm trying to guide them in being involved in the process. But even sitting on the meetings and reading it, that's a level of details that I haven't been able to find a way to unpack myself yet. And I think in listening to this tonight, my biggest concern is, you know, we're a few weeks in, especially with like the 7th grade middle schoolers. Their transition level right now is so incredible. Socially, emotionally, the schedule, the teachers, you name it. They probably have the biggest amount of transition going on. And now I hear that in Model C, I think we were at, I lost track, honestly. If we're reassigning teachers, I'm very concerned that those kids who may choose hybrid are suddenly now having to readjust to a potential new teacher again. It's one thing for our parents to try to stay as flexible as we can with these schedules, but it's highly concerning to try to keep, especially, you know, a 7th grader, to deal with all those changes. I was actually truly excited when you talked about the high school. The Florida virtual seems like a dream for my child because she is not enjoying sitting on a computer all day long. But honestly, please think about the educators and what they can do in the longevity of all this, because I cannot imagine, as someone who's stood in front of a classroom trying to teach to a group of kids that are in class, while virtually impossible to watch a screen as we are right now, to try to connect with students at home, and then to think that you're going to have a portion of them that you may never see in person. They may want to do it, but can they keep that up for 3, 6 months or the rest of the year? I can't imagine it. And I just don't want to set any student up who goes into a potentially remote in this scenario to find out 3 months down the line that our educators are burning out, because they have already been through enough and they are stepping up left and right. And we need to make sure we're considering that. I also think a lot of the kids at high school would benefit from more asynchronous learning. Let's start ramping them up for what college life is like, because having a little downtime off the screen would probably help their mental health at this point. But the biggest thing, I mean, some of those are just comments for consideration, but in trying to help students, and I don't know if any other families are out there thinking the same thing, my kids are really concerned about their own safety. They've taken this very serious from day one. And I can't guide them right now on how to unpack some of those smaller steps of, you know, we can say one way in the hallway. You're like, yeah, that's great, Mom. Have you been in the high school hallway? I have. I'm like, well, actually I have. It's been a few years, but I've walked those hallways myself. But those are their concerns. And I don't have any feedback for them at this point.
Okay. That's a good takeaway. And there's clearly more that we can do to educate students to feel comfortable coming back to the buildings. So that's I appreciate that, Shannon. We'll do some work on that.
And thanks. And I'll plan to be there tomorrow night because, you know, I'm getting used to these Zoom call things.
See you tomorrow.
Great.
All right. Back to Joe and Sarah.
Hi. One follow-up question about the remote, the full remote option is whether they would have specials, art, music, and would that be with their original elementary school special teachers or not?
So yes, they would, and we're talking elementary. Yes, they would have the specials. It could potentially be a teacher from a different school as their homeroom teacher or their classroom teacher, and it could potentially be a specialist from another school as well, because we would again keep that class then intact.
Okay, and so they would have music, art.
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Erica, did you finish the survey? Are you ready to submit that?
I haven't done that, but believe me, I already put out a call that says I might have something I need to run by a learning designer tomorrow morning, so let me know.
Cool.
I had a question. I have the criteria with the metrics, and I was kind of wondering, given the fact that the parents of athletes at the high school and middle school were alerted to one positive COVID case on Sunday. Where does that fall? Because it says clearly among individuals who have been in the district school buildings, it can be 3 cases total. Now, if the athletes haven't been in the building, is that that doesn't matter? Like, we haven't had 3 cases among the people in the building as they're considering that metric tomorrow night. So my question is, are we looking at it as, and then also, has there been any more cases, or do we only hear about the first one in any cluster?
So I will answer the second question first, because that's easier. So any case that is diagnosed and we're taking measures, you will hear about.
Okay.
So if certainly there's more communication directly with individuals who are deemed close contacts, we work with our town health agents who work with local tracers, the tracing collaborative. The reality is the agents don't know and the public health nurses don't know about cases until it enters the state system, which is called MAVEN. Ideally, they know right away. Usually the person who knows the soonest is the student, if they're old enough, or the parent, and the parent reaches out. This is going to be incredibly important that parents do not follow the Attleboro model. If you watch the news, born and raised in Attleboro, where the parent sent a student to school knowing full well that the student had tested positive, and I forget the exact number of students and staff that ended up having to be quarantined. It was extensive. So we are going to have to rely on families to let us know when cases happen. We then will begin our contact tracing right away. So we are not the official contact tracers. Our nurses are rock stars and have already worked an entire year's worth of time now, 2 weeks in, to the school year. But so we do our own tracing, we do our own contacts, we do our own isolating and quarantining. We can't require anyone to quarantine. So the folks who we dealt with that particular team, any coaching or students, we're quarantining them from anything from our school-based activities. We don't have the authority to say you actually have to isolate at home. That's a town health agent and public health nurse. So we're going to be very aggressive on that. And anytime there's a new case, we would go through the same alerting procedure. It's not going to be, it's just a cluster now, we're good, and we'll just let that lie. We will continue to keep families. We do have to maintain HIPAA compliance. I know that's, common knowledge. And certainly every word I say now, I'm always literally checking the words as I say it, making sure I'm not just about to violate someone's rights. So it's hard, but I believe, we did a good job in that situation. We didn't step out of any bounds, but let everyone know that there was a case. I am not going to try and speak on behalf of the 9 committee members. I can tell you, based on conversations that I've had with some of the committee members, if I was a betting man, and I am, I would put my money on the fact that they would, as I would personally, say that the in the building is not a qualifier that's really meaningful there. So at this point, if a student was diagnosed within, in the school, on the fields or otherwise, in our student body, that would be the qualifier, not someone that had set foot necessarily directly in the building. But you'll have to tune in tomorrow night at 7 o'clock to see.
Believe me,
I know you will
be there. I will be there for the first hour, and then I have an alumni committee meeting, and I'm trying to keep my head in one place because I have Cole and a computer screen behind me because he's doing his 10th grade homework.
Nice. Hi, Cole.
So.
Well, the good thing about school committee meetings is that, you'll be able to start, and then you'll go do whatever you have to do, and you come back, and we'll still be talking.
Yeah, I still have another volunteer commitment that night, so I will be there for the first hour and look forward to hearing it, and we'll try to catch up as we go. But yeah, I literally walk around. I keep this printed out in the kitchen to be like, okay, so what's the case count? Where are we? Like, what do we think? What's the odds? Yeah. So I'm a betting woman, and I like to be prepared.
Very good. All right. Thanks, Erica.
Thanks.
Maggie Rose. Oh, Maggie Rose.
Oh, well,
there you are.
I lowered my hand because.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Just covered it.
All right.
My son plays hockey, so I know that the youth hockey program just had a team that played a game, and there was a parent from the other team that we played that was positive. So we were notified about that, but we don't know if if anybody else, if we were exposed, or because they don't tell us who it was.
Yep.
So
they can't. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
But it's just that with that, and then the athletic department, you get the email that there's someone in the athletic department that has it. It's just like it just seems that, it's going to start to snowball. So whether or not they're in the building, or like they're not even in the building yet. These are just the kids that are playing sports, which is probably a very small percentage of the student body.
Yep. Yeah, it is. It very quickly could become a domino effect. Yes. That is a fair statement. Yep. And we're going to stay on it and react accordingly. And I can tell you without hesitation, right? We're going to do everything we can, acting in the overall safety of our students and staff. So.
Yep.
All right.
I appreciate everything you're doing.
Great. Thanks, Maggie.
Thanks.
All right. And Michael Rossi is the only one with the hand still raised. Did you think of your second question?
Yes. Yeah. I got a couple. I actually wrote them down this time, so I'm not forgetting them. Sorry. Try to be efficient here. In the elementary school situation for the collapsing of rooms, who are the educators that would take on the remote? Is it within the pool of existing, say, third grade or second grade teachers? And how are those decisions being made? Like, who becomes the remote teacher? I guess I have a couple of questions, but they're a little disconnected from that. So maybe you can just answer that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So that will be entirely driven by the numbers in the classes. So the classes with the smaller numbers, we're always looking at class sizes. And so, principals know which numbers are right on that cusp. when you had, when I was principal, how many years ago, there was mostly 4 and 5 sections per grade level. Now it's mostly 3 sections per grade level with some 2 sections per grade level, a 4 here and there. When you've got 3, it's hard to shift down to 2, 3 20s, and you lose 10 kids. That's still 50. That's still 2 sections of 25. So it's perpetually a numbers game. So the decision will be based on classes where the greatest numbers are withdrawn from, and the grade levels where we can collapse and still maintain, I forget who it was that asked the question earlier, and still maintain adequate and effective class sizes. So we'll be looking at as an entirety across the elementary schools. So it wouldn't necessarily be one school that takes the hit. It could be a 2nd grade teacher at Pine Grove and a 5th grade teacher at Salisbury. I'm totally making this up, but it could be literally any grade level from any school. And again, depending on the numbers, it might be that we have small enough numbers that we only are freeing up 3 teachers, and it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a 6, or something like that. But it will be driven by the numbers of students who are pulling out of those sections to be in the remote option.
Could it theoretically affect the hybrid students as well? Because if, I don't know, if enough students pull out of 2 classrooms of teachers and one of them then goes remote, but there's only like 2 remaining kids in one class, do they get shifted over to, this is all kind of hypothetical.
Yeah. So it is very likely, and this is one of the unfortunate byproducts, is that with those classrooms that we'll say shrink, for lack of a better term, with students unenrolling to stay in the full remote option, that the classes that shrink the most would be the likely candidate to then have the remaining students be dispersed among the other sections within that grade level. So they very likely will be
hybrid. Yeah, regardless if they're hybrid or remote. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that answered that. And maybe you said this before, but does these options that are being considered, do they kick in when hybrid is announced, whenever it is, or do they automatically kick in on October 13th, no matter what? Like, in other words, if the decision by the committee tomorrow is we're going to just stay remote another 4 weeks, do we just ride the wave, or is it we just have to disperse these classrooms immediately so that there's continuity?
Yeah. No, if we ended up shifting or not shifting rather, then we would delay this another 4 weeks. So certainly, now that we have the time, do a little more, and that we have to create a deadline for people to opt so that we can then give you concrete answers as families. But the shift would take place if and when we shift to hybrid. So if that vote is taken tomorrow night and the shift is on the 13th, that gives us the time to set up whatever needs to be in place so that we're in place for the 13th. If that decision was not made tomorrow night, then we shift to the end of October for a decision, unless the committee changes their time frame.
So the longer it's kicked down the road, whether, for whatever reason, I'm not judging the decision, for whatever reason it extends, the bigger the disruption is going to be for the student. Ultimately, in terms of all the things that have been addressed by other parents, in terms of the community and, the continuity of the school, the expectations of the cohort, all that sort of stuff, it's just going to be a bigger kind of splash for them, I guess. If a turn up all of a sudden, because in some ways, if you have a health consideration, you don't really have a choice,
Correct.
And so you keep saying choices, but there aren't a lot of choices for a lot of people. So I worry the most about one of the reasons why we stuck with the district is the continuity and the community that was grown into the, in the elementary school and that sort of thing. And it really pains me to think that by choosing to stay safe in a remote option, that you would be basically removed from that potentially and put into another situation that your child has to then learn into or grow into or whatever. I know it's hard and everybody's making hard decisions, but that's the thing that really weighs on me this evening.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think that certainly argues then that if the decision tomorrow night is not to shift to hybrid, that we then reconsider that. Our intention all along has been not shift to this remote option until we're no longer in remote. But I think you make a valid argument to at least consider, and there may be, a million other roadblocks that make that not possible, but the, proverbial kicking the can down the road allows students to make longer and more connections, and that makes the transition harder even when it does happen. So it's a valid point you raise. I appreciate you for bringing that up. J, just the letter J.
Hello.
Hey there.
Hi. The last speaker actually answered or said a lot of my concerns that I had as well, and thoughts as well. So I appreciate the person who spoke ahead of me. But, I do just want to say, a few things. I apologize if I'm a little repetitive. I've tried to follow as best I can.
Yep.
But yeah, I definitely do have some concerns in general with trying to make these decisions. Do I send, my children in hybrid, for that in-person experience? Do I keep them remote? Especially now with the positive case in the district, and there are so few students that are actually together right now, and that we're actually having to think about, okay, is it actually safe to send, my child in for a hybrid learning experience? I just want to clarify. So, and I think it was answered before, if we go hybrid, there's a chance that the class may change anyway, correct? The teacher in the classroom potentially could change depending on the numbers if I stick with hybrid?
Correct, yes. Yep.
Okay, perfect. And also if I choose the fully remote option, that she'll lose that teacher and class relationship that they've built for the last few weeks, but they'll get a new teacher in class. Now, if the district goes back to fully remote, she will not rejoin her original class. She'll stay with her kind of new remote option family, as I guess we can call it.
Yep. And so we were talking at the elementary level, correct?
Yes. Sorry,
Yeah.
I apologize.
No, that's okay. So we've had that discussion, and I think if we shift back to remote, it's again with the assumption that we're going to be then moving back towards hybrid. The governor and everyone has made it very clear that schools should be full in person as soon as they're feasibly possible. So there will always be pressure to move back to hybrid and then to full in person, regardless of what we or collectively believe is the right thing to do. So in that case, I would say, yes, we would keep that new remote class intact, because that then becomes this consistent community for your child, so that if and when another transition happens, it doesn't cause another transition to the point that Michael raised in regards to, it's kicking the can down the road, but it's also, if we make the shift voted tomorrow night on the 13th and then have to shift back and then back, it also provides that continuity, which is important.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
So my other question is this, that if I choose the fully remote option, kind of risk losing that relationship that she has right now with everything going with the remote option that's going right now. If I do the remote choice, but I decide that it's just for whatever reason, it isn't working. It's just not happening. And you know what, I'm going to give the hybrid a choice. She won't be joining her original hybrid cohort in class. Is that correct?
She potentially could, but I would say would not be, because that class likely would have been broken up because of the other decisions.
Okay. Either way, it sounds like there's just a lot of changes that are going to be happening. And I just have concerns for, again, elementary level, with the younger students having to go through all of those changes, when just the change of COVID in general with COVID life has been a lot, at least for my kids, to be able to grasp and kind of learn a new way of life. And I just feel like it's a lot more stress and a lot more changes that I was hoping that maybe wouldn't happen. I think the remote plan right now is, at least for my kids, fantastic. I'm very impressed with how the school has done remote versus, I know back in March it was more of a last minute, nobody expected it back then.
No.
So I am very impressed with how things are going right now. I just do have concerns with all the changes. And I do also worry that, the elementary option only has the A. I also I'm concerned for the teachers as well, because that's a lot of work for them to get that relationship. And it sounds like they're going to be having a lot of changes too. And that's a lot more work for them to then build new relationships, new rapport, get a new group of kids going again, when it sounds like at the drop of a hat, depending on numbers, it could switch again as well. And it just, I mean, if there's any way that the elementary could do that model B where it's somewhat consistent, I mean, it seems like it would be helpful not only for the students, but also the teachers as well, to kind of keep some type of consistency.
Yeah, and I will review the numbers once we have them, and ideally that would be the best. But there really isn't, and I know we've been saying this since March, there are no good answers here. Right. And I hate that our only option that seems viable at this point means that we're disrupting community that had been established. It's been 2 weeks, but a lot has been established in 2 weeks. And like you said, everyone in the district has done an unbelievable amount of work to prepare for remote, knowing that what happened in the spring was not according to any plan. And it was last minute, it was haphazard, and everyone did their best. But we had time and we had runway to plan an effective remote educational model. And teachers have stepped up, and teachers are getting more comfortable by the day. And I know you're seeing that as parents. So there's been a lot of people who have said, my gosh, can't we just stay remote? And so obviously there's another implication that's very challenging for families who deal with childcare, who can't be home all day. And there's a lot of families that would impact. But from an educational standpoint, all remote, all of the students in one place is a good educational model, right? In person in our classrooms, like we've always done, is the best, but all remote is better than when we start to split. And we keep saying that, and it's not a good solution, but it really is, as far as the educational product and for teachers and everyone involved. It's, as you said, it's been good, right? I think people are shocked, having experienced the spring. People were shocked at how effective it could be, and that doesn't mean we haven't had challenges, but it has been a high quality product, and our educators have done an unbelievable amount of work. So.
Yeah. One other thing, and then my questions are done. I just want to understand, when we fill out the survey, is that the survey that will apply for the entire year? Or if the school committee decides to stay remote, once whenever that next time is that they decide to go hybrid, do we need to fill out a survey again? Because again, the world could change down the road then as well, which will change our decision. Are we going to be filling out another survey?
I mean, the hope is that once we commit here, right, we're gonna rework the survey and get some of these caveats, because I think these are good caveats to add, and that helps us refine the data, so we're not having to continually survey. If I guess it would depend on the decision and whether that timing got changed. If the committee said, yeah, we're going to wait 4 weeks, or we're going to wait 2 months, or we're going to change it to 2 weeks, that could have some impact. But ideally, we're asking parents to commit here. And then in the future, if you want to make an adjustment, reach out to Anna, reach out to Kim, so that it's not filling out a survey. It's, hey, I need to make a shift either way, rather than asking you to commit to the same thing. Or, if your mind changes, then just to reach out to one of us so that we can make those adjustments for you.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Sophia P.
Hi, I was just wondering, do full remote kids follow the same school calendar as hybrid would be?
I was just going to read your question in the chat. I didn't make the connection. Yes. So regardless of whether you are the remote, or you're hybrid, or the remote option, the same school calendar, it was condensed from 180 to 170 academic days, but the general school calendar still applies for all students. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then one more thing.
Sure.
So with positive cases that come up, is there a way that the district, every school, can be alerted of them, versus just how with this pass through the athletics, just the high school and middle school were alerted? Mm-hmm. Just because that could change people's views on if they wanted to send their children or not.
So we have to be cautious about how we alert to protect. At this point, we are alerting when it's a one-off case like that. We are alerting the school. As that adjusts, we would broaden our communications, I would say.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
As a parent, you need to know that information. I can tell you this, if there is any implication for a school with a close contact or anything like that, we would absolutely notify that school, right? So even if there was something where a student was involved and a family member at another school was a close contact, we would then notify that school directly as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Chris, no last name, just Chris.
Yep. Hi.
Hey there.
Yes, so my question is, just as you consider the absence for elementary school, what are the metrics that you'll be using to determine whether or not you'll be combining the first and second grades into a single combined cohort?
The metrics we use, you meaning for class size?
Yes, exactly, yeah.
I don't know that we have a hard and set number. It would be based on the, as we look across all K through 6 classrooms at Newbury Elementary, Pine Grove School, and Salisbury Elementary. We would look to the classes that had the most reduction. And again, if we got to the point where we weren't able to reduce a class for any reason, then that would be an additional cost that the district would have to consider. We're not going to combine a class and create unfavorable class sizes because of a choice that parents have and are making. So I would say there isn't a standard metric, but the same class sizes that we use, the targets we use, would we use as a guide, which is, at this point, anything K is with an assistant in there is no more than 20, preferably upper teens. And then, no more than 20 early elementary, low 20s for upper elementary. But there isn't a hard and fast number.
And is there a way for parents today to look at the number of students that are current, like the answers to the surveys? Can we all see that as well? Or is that just something that you're keeping internal as far as the data around the number of families that are considering the remote learning path?
Yeah, we can certainly share that. I mean, obviously we can't share names. The original survey data that I mentioned, I think was 339. There was multiple answers. Parents, submitted it and then just wanted to make sure, or forgot and resubmitted, or submitted both answers. So certainly this has been a more refined process working through Anna. So we can absolutely, once we have a very clear number on that, we can absolutely share that information. Absolutely. Yep.
Great, that's it. Thank you so much. And thank you for everything as well. That both the fall and the spring have been really great to see the work that the district has been doing. So thank you.
Excellent, Chris. I appreciate that.
So Brian, just to clarify, as we develop that second survey for those individuals who have already confirmed that they would like to participate in the remote model even prior to this meeting, would you be asking them then to fill out that survey again?
I think we got to take a look at the survey and see how much it changes, because I would say yes, it probably makes sense.
It does. Yeah.
The caveat that I forget who it was that originally, and then Erica committed to rewriting the survey for us and qualifying it. But that, that I think is going to be important data. And I don't believe there'd be a way to change the survey and capture that data. So I believe, yes, the best thing to do is request that everyone resubmit, and we'll share information about why we're asking folks to do that. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. And just to let folks know, there was a questions about this particular presentation, and if it was being recorded, and would it be available for folks who were not able to attend tonight to get the information, and it will be.
Yes. Yep. And then someone asked a question about the cost associated with the Florida model. Just to confirm that there is no cost to families. So there would be no charge if we land with the Florida model. That's a district cost. So certainly as we're figuring out our budget and what the resources we have, that's a factor that plays into our budgeting. There would be no cost to families regardless of the model that we choose. There was a question about if in any case, if the school goes to hybrid, all current classes, regardless of where the child comes from, would be changed. Not all classes, but potentially there would be classes that would be impacted where a student was needing to move to another classroom, even if they're choosing the hybrid model. But it would not be all classes. I would say it won't even be the majority of classes. It will be a handful of classes that get condensed. Those who understand the high school schedule know you can collapse a class, you can collapse 2 classes. When you start to go the 3rd class, the entire structure of the high school schedule collapses. So that's a very different animal. And the reason why we look to the Florida virtual school versus collapsing like we could potentially do at the middle in the elementary level. So I think, all right, so I think that's all the questions. So I don't see any more hands raised. So I certainly appreciate everyone's participation tonight. Thank you to Kim and Anna for the presentation and answering questions. And again, we're going to send this video out. We'll get this out tomorrow with more information. We are still going to ask for at least an initial commitment by Thursday so that we can start to gauge and give you information and give you some concrete information by which you can make some decisions. So thank you for your participation tonight. Thank you for those that asked questions. For those that you just came to listen, thanks for participating. And I hope you all have a wonderful night.